The thirst for quiet was a tangible need, a deep-seated craving that had burrowed into my very marrow. 20 years in Washington, D.C., a city that hummed with a constant thrum of tension, had left me frayed. It was a life measured in sirens, coded transmissions, and the stark, chilling finality of a door being breached. Every monument and street corner was haunted by the ghosts of operations past, specters of a life I was running from. When my wife, Sarah, discovered a real estate listing for a home in Serenity Woods, the name itself felt like a promise, an absolution. The photographs depicted a handsome two-story house, its backyard, a gentle, verdant slope that ended at the crystalline edge of a private lake. It was an idyll, a portrait of the tranquility we craved. It was a place where the loudest sound would be the laughter of our 5-year-old daughter, Lily, a sanctuary where I could finally, carefully, begin to dismantle the fortress I had built around myself. We moved with the swift efficiency of a tactical insertion, closing in 3 weeks and paying in cash to eliminate bureaucratic friction. Our arrival was on a sublime June morning, the air a heady cocktail of pine resin and rich, damp earth, a world away from the capital's perpetual miasma of asphalt and ambition. I dedicated the first day to the civilian mission of assembling Lily's swing set near the water's edge. My muscles, accustomed to a different kind of strain, protested the unfamiliar labor, but my spirit felt unburdened for the first time in what felt like a lifetime. As I torqued the final bolt, a human-shaped eclipse fell over me. "That is not the approved color." The voice was sharp as broken glass, imbued with an unshakable sense of command. I rose from my crouch, shielding my eyes from the midday sun. A woman stood at the precise edge of my property line, her posture ramrod straight, arms folded across a starched white polo shirt, bearing an embroidered SW crest. Her age was indeterminate, somewhere in the late 50s, framed by a helmet of blonde hair so rigidly sprayed it seemed less like an organic substance and more like a piece of personal protective equipment. A clipboard was clutched in her hand, less an accessory and more a symbol of office. "I'm sorry," I asked, standing and wiping grease from my hands onto my jeans. "The swing set," she enunciated, as if speaking to a child. A perfectly manicured fingernail tapped a line on her clipboard. Article 4, Section B, Subsection 12 of the Serenity Woods Covenants, Conditions and Restrictions. All outdoor play structures are to be of natural earth tones. That fire engine red is a flagrant violation. I blinked, my gaze shifting from the cheerful, cherry-red apparatus to her severe expression. "It's for my daughter. She's 5. Red is her favorite color." "The bylaws exist to protect the aesthetic integrity and property values of our community," she stated, her voice utterly devoid of empathy. "I am HOA Karen, president of the Homeowners Association. You must be Mr. Evans. I am extending a one-time courtesy verbal warning. You have 48 hours to repaint it to an approved shade or remove it entirely. A formal notice of violation will be in your mailbox by this evening." Her tone wasn't one of request. It was of decree. It was the voice of a person for whom the concept of being denied was a foreign language. I felt an old, unwelcome sensation, a cold prickle at the base of my skull. The instinctive hyper-awareness that precedes a confrontation. My body was reacting to a suburban dispute as if it were a hostile encounter in a foreign embassy. I took a deliberate, calming breath and forced the instinct down. "Right. Hua! I'm Alex," I said, offering a hand that she regarded with disdain and pointedly ignored. "Look, we just moved in. I haven't even had a chance to read the bylaws yet." "Ignorance of the law is not a defense. Mr. Evans, she sniffed. Your realtor was obligated to provide the full covenant package. It is the homeowner's responsibility to be informed. Her gaze slid past me, locking onto the small wooden dock that stretched from my lawn into the lake. It was a key feature that had sold us on the house. And that is another matter entirely. The dock. What about it? I asked, the last vestiges of my neighborly goodwill beginning to evaporate. That dock is an unapproved private structure. All lake access is strictly controlled via the community boat launch to ensure equitable enjoyment for all residents. The lake is a shared community asset, not your personal swimming pool. This time, a surge of genuine anger cut through my forced calm. I believe you're mistaken. Our title insurance policy and the property deed are unequivocally clear. Our property line extends 10 feet from the shoreline into the water, and the dock was explicitly listed as a grandfathered-in structure, included with the sale. It's deeded private access. HOA's lips compressed into a bloodless, paper-thin line. Your deed is superseded by the HOA covenants you legally agreed to when you purchased a home in this community. The lake is called Lake HOA. I personally funded its dredging and ecological restoration a decade ago. It is, for all intents and purposes, my lake. I determine the rules of its use. The staggering, unvarnished narcissism of her statement was breathtaking. Lake HOA. She had branded the central jewel of the community with her own name. This wasn't merely a power trip. It was a monument to her ego. Well, I said, my voice hardening. My attorney, who specializes in real estate law, reviewed the covenants in relation to the deed. He stated that a pre-existing, deeded property right cannot be legally extinguished by an HOA bylaw enacted after the fact. It's a settled legal principle. I was using my lawyer's exact words. A habit from years of needing to report information with precision. I saw a flicker in her eyes, a brief, unguarded flash of something beyond mere anger. It was a deep, profound, and personal wound. It was the look of a monarch whose divine right had been questioned by a peasant. In her worldview, I was not a homeowner. I was the rebellious governor of a rogue province in her meticulously curated kingdom. We will see about that. Mr. Evans, she said, her voice lowering into a promise of future conflict. People who show such blatant disregard for the rules in Serenity Woods often find that their life here becomes most uncomfortable. She pivoted with military precision and marched off, her spine as rigid as her convictions. I stood there, the sweet scent of pine now feeling less like an invitation to freedom and more like the perimeter of a gilded cage. Sarah emerged onto the deck, her expression clouded with concern. Was that a neighbor? She asked. That was the Queen. I sighed, gesturing with my wrench at HOA's retreating form. I think our quiet life just met its first complication. That evening, the promised envelope was waiting. It contained the formal violation notice for the swing set, complete with a $50 fine. Stapled behind it was a second, far more serious notice for the unauthorized dock and private lake access, levying a $500 fine and demanding its removal within 30 days. At the bottom, a handwritten note in sharp, aggressive script read, "This is a non-negotiable directive. Your compliance is expected." The war had been declared. HOA's opening offensive was a masterpiece of bureaucratic attrition. The violation notices began arriving with the chilling regularity of a dripping faucet. A week after the first salvo, a new envelope appeared. This one cited a breach of Article 7, Section C, improper maintenance of lawn. The accompanying fine was $75. The infraction, documented with a close-up, ruler-adorned photograph, was that a patch of grass near our mailbox measured 3.25 inches, a full quarter inch over the mandated maximum height. I stared at the photograph, then at my lawn, which I had meticulously mowed just 2 days before. It was a perfect, unassailable accusation. My training, the part of me that had been responsible for de-escalating conflicts in failed states and war zones, urged a calm, logical approach. Surely, a reasonable conversation could untangle this. I found the HOA's number and dialed. Serenity Woods Homeowners Association. HOA Karen speaking. The voice was as starched and unforgiving as her attire. Hello, HOA. This is Alex Evans at 112 Willow Creek Lane. I began, my tone deliberately even and non-confrontational. I'm calling about the lawn violation notice. Ah, yes, she replied, a note of undisguised satisfaction in her voice. I documented it myself this morning during my rounds. Your neglect is already beginning to detract from the neighborhood's curb appeal. Wah! I mowed the lawn on Tuesday, I explained, maintaining a patient cadence. We've had a lot of rain. Grass grows. A quarter-inch discrepancy feels punitive. Wouldn't you agree? The rules are not suggestions. Mr. Evans, she countered. 3 inches is the rule. It is not 3 1/4. Perhaps you should consider a more frequent mowing schedule, as I do, or invest in professional landscaping services. Diligence is the price of maintaining our community's property values. I took a slow, measured breath, visualizing the placid surface of the lake. Understood. But the more pressing issue remains the dock. I've had my attorney send a formal letter to the HOA's registered agent, reiterating my legal position regarding the deeded access. A frigid silence stretched over the line. Your attorney, she finally spat, the words dripping with contempt. Are you threatening me with legal action, Mr. Evans? You, who have been a resident of my community for less than a month. It's not a threat. It's a clarification of established legal facts, I said, trying to steer the conversation back to solid ground. I want to be a good neighbor. I'm willing to compromise on the aesthetic issues. We can repaint the swing set, but the dock is a fundamental part of the property we purchased. You purchased a home governed by an association, she hissed, her voice rising. An association with rules that I am bound to enforce. You will remove that dock, or the fines will accumulate. I am authorized to levy a penalty of $50 per day. Let's see how long your attorney advises you to hold out against that. The line went dead. I stood in my kitchen, the phone still pressed to my ear. A grim sense of familiarity washing over me. This was like negotiating with an ideologue. Her position was not rooted in law or reason, but in a fervent, unshakable belief in her own authority. Logic was not a tool. It was an insult to her. So, I made a tactical concession. That weekend, Sarah and I spent a miserable afternoon repainting Lily's beloved red swing, set a drab, HOA approved, taupe. Lily watched from the porch, her lower lip trembling. Why does it have to be the sad color? Daddy, she asked. Explaining the tyranny of restrictive covenants to a 5-year-old felt like a profound moral failure. It was a small surrender, but it felt significant, and it tasted like ash. I mowed the lawn 3 times the following week, until it was shorn to the nub. The fines continued, unabated. A notice for improper waste receptacle placement. Our bins, placed at the curb for pickup, were apparently 6 inches too far from the grassy verge. $100 fine. A notice for unapproved seasonal decorations. Sarah had hung a simple, tasteful sunflower wreath on our door. Apparently, it constituted a seasonal decoration, and all such items required prior written approval from the Architectural Review Committee, which HOA, naturally, chaired. Another $50 fine. Each notice now came with a neatly printed invoice, detailing my outstanding balance, which included the ever-accruing daily fine for the dock. The total was spiraling toward the thousands. It became brutally clear that my compliance was irrelevant. The goal was not to correct my behavior, but to punish my existence. This was a siege. She intended to make our life so expensive and so miserable that we would either tear down the dock in defeat or simply sell our dream home and flee her domain. The old part of me, the part I had tried to decommission, began to stir from its dormancy. I was no longer just Alex Evans, suburban husband and father. The analyst, the intelligence officer, was reasserting control. I started a file, not a simple folder, but a full case file. I scanned every notice, every photograph, every piece of correspondence. I created a secure, encrypted folder on my laptop, labeled Project Nightingale, a nostalgic nod to an old operation. I documented every interaction with meticulous detail, creating a precise timeline of the escalating harassment. I brought the home security system, a professional-grade setup I'd insisted on during the purchase, to full operational status. It wasn't just a burglar alarm. It was a network of high-definition, night vision cameras with motion tracking capabilities, covering every approach to the property. It was a system designed for a life where threats were kinetic. But the principles of intelligence gathering remained the same: observe, document, analyze, prepare. One night, I sat in my home office, the room that was supposed to be my writer's retreat, now transformed into my personal command center. My eyes fell on the single-framed photograph on my desk. It showed my old team, 6 of us in full kit, standing before a Black Hawk helicopter against the backdrop of a sun-blasted, featureless desert. We looked haggard, grim, but united by an unbreakable bond forged in extremity. I found Marcus's face, my second in command, now a section chief at Quantico. A pang of something I refused to name: nostalgia, perhaps, or a longing for a world where threats were overt and the rules of engagement, however brutal, were understood, passed through me. Here, the adversary wore pastel polos and wielded bylaws like precision-guided munitions. The stakes were different, but the fight was becoming just as personal. This wasn't about a geopolitical objective. It was about the sanctity of my family's peace. And I was beginning to understand that to win this new kind of war, I might have to resurrect the man I had worked so hard to bury. The shift from bureaucratic warfare to physical aggression was insidious, executed under a carefully constructed veil of plausible deniability. It began with the sprinklers. I was jolted awake one morning around 5 a.m. by a persistent, rhythmic slapping sound against our bedroom window. The sky was still the color of a fresh bruise. Peering through the blinds, I saw the source: a sprinkler head on HOA's immaculate lawn, normally angled to mist her award-winning petunias, had been re-aimed. A powerful, pulsating stream of water was hammering the side of our house, saturating the window frames and cascading down the siding. I pulled on a robe and went outside into the cool, damp air. My slippers sank into a newly formed mud pit where our mulch bed met her lawn. The relentless jet of water had flattened Sarah's recently planted hydrangeas, their delicate blue heads now bowed in the muck. I walked to the property line and examined the sprinkler head. It hadn't been knocked out of alignment. The nozzle had been deliberately, forcefully twisted 180 degrees. A hot, clean rage, dangerously familiar, surged through me. My immediate impulse was to march to her door, to pound on it until she answered, to drag her out to witness her petty vandalism. But my training slammed down on the impulse like a blast shield. Emotion is a liability. Assess, document, respond from a position of control. I went back inside, retrieved my phone, and began recording. I filmed the sprinkler hammering our house, the saturated walls, the destroyed flowers, the pool of water forming alarmingly close to our foundation. I made sure the video's metadata would be timestamped. Only then did I walk to the sprinkler control box on the side of her garage and deactivate the system. Later that morning, I saw Hoa's husband, Richard, a man whose posture seemed permanently bowed by the weight of his wife's personality, emerge for the morning paper. I opted for a non-confrontational approach. "Morning, Richard," I called out. He flinched. "Oh, morning, Alex." "Having some trouble with your sprinkler system," I said, my tone casual. "One of the heads was aimed at our house. Soaked it pretty good for a few hours." Richard's gaze darted everywhere but at me. "Oh, gosh. Sorry about that. The landscapers were here yesterday. They must have knocked it." It was a pathetic, transparent lie. I had already reviewed the footage from my security cameras. At 3:47 a.m., a figure with Richard's distinct, shuffling gait had knelt by that sprinkler head for a full 30 seconds. "Right. The landscapers," I said, letting the silence stretch. "Well, I'm concerned about water getting behind the siding, and it looks like Sarah's hydrangeas are a total loss." "I'm sure it's all fine," he mumbled, already retreating. I'll take a look at it." He vanished inside. The message was clear. We can touch your home. We can cause damage. And you will not be able to prove a thing. A few days later, our custom-made wooden sign, a simple, rustic plaque reading "The Evans Family," vanished from its hooks by our front door. I had hung it just the day before. It wasn't broken or defaced. It was simply gone. The security footage showed a hooded figure walking up our driveway at 2:17 a.m., lifting the sign with an unnerving efficiency and melting back into the darkness. It was a targeted act, a symbolic erasure of our identity. Sarah was deeply upset. "It's just so mean-spirited," she said, her voice trembling. "Why?" I knew why. It was another step in HOA's psychological campaign. It was meant to make us feel exposed, unwelcome, and powerless. Small acts of aggression, each one deniable, creating a constant, low-level hum of anxiety. I didn't call the police. It was too minor. It would be seen as a petty squabble, and it would only escalate the situation on her terms. Instead, I escalated my defenses. I installed more sensitive motion-activated floodlights and added 2 new covert cameras, one disguised as a birdhouse and another as a sprinkler head. Positioned to get clear, identifiable facial shots. Our peaceful sanctuary was hardening into a forward operating base. The petty vandalism continued. A deep scratch appeared on Sarah's car after it was parked on the street. Our newspaper was stolen. The air was let out of my truck's tires. Each act was a pinprick, but the cumulative effect was a slow bleeding of our sense of security. My Project Nightingale file grew thicker with video clips, incident reports, and time-stamped photos. The evidence was all circumstantial, but the pattern was irrefutable. In my old world, we called this pattern of life analysis. HOA was testing my responses, probing my defenses, and I had no doubt she was enjoying it immensely. This wasn't just about the dock anymore. This was about the thrill of domination. This realization prompted me to make a call I had been putting off. "Marcus," I said when he answered. "Alex, how's the quiet life?" "I need a favor. A professional one." I explained the situation, framing it as a severe harassment case. "I need a full workup on someone. The HOA president, Hoang Nguyen. I want to know everything. Financials, past lawsuits, business dealings, political affiliations, whatever a top-tier private investigator can dig up legally." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "This is more than a spat over lawn height, isn't it?" "She's escalating," I said simply. "I need to understand the adversary." "I know a guy," Marcus said, his tone shifting from friendly to serious. "Ex-bureau, runs one of the best corporate intelligence firms in the country. He's discreet and thorough. I'll make the call. But Alex, be careful. You got out for a reason. Don't let some suburban tyrant drag you back into the world you left behind." "I'm not," I said, though I wasn't entirely sure I was telling the truth. "I'm just protecting my family." But as I hung up, I knew a line had been crossed. I had just launched an intelligence operation against my neighbor. The man who wanted peace was now actively gathering intel for a war. Having failed to dislodge me through bureaucratic and physical means, HOA opened a new front in her war, the psychological battlefield of our community. Her chosen weapon was the Serenity Woods Neighbors private Facebook group, a digital town square she wielded with the precision of a master propagandist. The post appeared on a Tuesday. It was a perfectly crafted piece of passive-aggressive slander, a stiletto wrapped in a velvet glove. My name was never mentioned, but every resident knew who she was talking about. Hoang Nguyen posted, "Just a heartfelt reminder about what makes Serenity Woods so special. It's our shared community values and mutual respect for the rules that protect our investments and our peaceful way of life. It's truly heartbreaking when new residents arrive who seem to feel they are above the very covenants that the rest of us are proud to uphold. Disregarding community assets and refusing all good faith efforts at dialogue not only violates our bylaws, but it also corrodes the spirit of neighborliness we all cherish. Let's continue to be the wonderful, considerate community we've always been. Community, first, protect our values." The post was accompanied by a stunning, professionally lit photograph of Lake Hoa, taken from an angle where my dock jutted into the frame like a malignant tumor. The comments from her loyalists were immediate and fawning. Brenda Miller, "You said it. Hoa. Some people have no class. Thank you for standing up for us." Gary Smith, "Rules are rules if they didn't like them. They shouldn't have moved here. We support you." I read the post, a cold knot forming in my gut. This was more damaging than any fine. She was methodically poisoning the well, painting me as a villainous outsider to an audience of our 100-plus neighbors. She was isolating us, turning our new home into an island. The real-world consequences were immediate. That afternoon, Sarah took Lily to the community pool. The moment they walked through the gate, the cheerful chatter of parents and splashing children died to a murmur. Mothers instinctively gathered their children closer. Sarah, who possesses an effortless social grace, tried to strike up a conversation with another mom and was met with a frosty smile and a monosyllabic reply. After 20 minutes of being treated like a disease vector, she brought a confused and tearful Lily home. They were all staring. "Alex," she told me, her voice tight with humiliation as she unpacked their still dry towels. Whispering, I heard one of them say, "That's the family with the illegal dock." My rage was a cold, quiet thing. This was no longer about me. HOA had made my wife and my 5-year-old daughter social pariahs. To understand her motivation, I needed more than just a P.I. report. That night, I spent hours online, digging into old municipal archives and local news articles. The woman I discovered was more complex and pathetic than I had imagined. Huang Nguyen had once been a rising star in local politics, a town councilwoman with a reputation for being a ruthless but effective operator. She had grand ambitions, but her abrasive style and a series of bitter public feuds led to her being unceremoniously ousted in a recall election 7 years ago. She had lost her power, her public identity. Serenity Woods wasn't just her home, it was her consolation prize, the only kingdom she had left to rule. Her obsession, her tyranny, it was all born from the deep, festering wound of that public humiliation. She wasn't just fighting for control of a lake. She was fighting the ghosts of her past, and I had become the face of every person who had ever defied her. This new understanding didn't soften my anger, but it sharpened my focus. I knew who my enemy was now. Not just a petty tyrant, but a woman terrified of losing the last scrap of authority she possessed. We attended the monthly neighborhood potluck, a final attempt at normalcy. HOA intercepted us at the entrance, her voice ringing out for all to hear. "Mr. Evans, so glad you could make it. I trust you received the latest invoice. Your delinquency is now approaching $5,000. Perhaps you should focus on paying your debts to the community." The conversations around us ceased. Every eye was on me. In that moment, I wasn't a new neighbor. I was the personification of HOA's narrative, the arrogant outsider. We left minutes later, our untouched offering sitting on the table. That night, I added screenshots of the Facebook post and a detailed account of the potluck incident to my file. The file was no longer just a defensive measure. It was an offensive weapon in waiting. I thought of something Marcus used to say during mission planning. You don't defeat an enemy by attacking their strengths. You identify their critical vulnerability, the single pillar holding up their entire structure, and you kick it out from under them. HOA's pillar was her reputation, her carefully crafted image as the benevolent, all-powerful protector of Serenity Woods. All her actions were designed to bolster that image and destroy mine. She had no idea that in her obsessive quest to defame me, she was handing me the very tools I would need to dismantle her world. Having successfully isolated us socially, HOA escalated to weaponizing the full weight of municipal and state authorities. It was a calculated and dangerous move, designed to create an official paper trail that would paint me as a troublesome, potentially criminal, element in the community. The first official visit was from the county sheriff. I was in the backyard with Lily, pushing her on the sad, beige swing set, when a squad car rolled to a stop at our curb. A young deputy walked up the driveway, his hand resting reflexively on his sidearm. "Alex Evans." "Yes," I replied, moving to meet him, keeping my hands visible and my posture open and non-threatening. The muscle memory of dealing with armed men was a language I couldn't forget. "Sir, we received an anonymous tip regarding a domestic disturbance at this address. Shouting, threats being made." A cold, controlled fury settled in my chest. "Deputy, as you can see, my daughter and I are playing. My wife is inside reading a book. The house has been quiet all day." The deputy's eyes scanned the peaceful scene, lingered on Lily, and then met mine with a look of weary comprehension. "This is the third anonymous call we've had for this address this week. Last week it was suspected drug activity." "Let me guess," I said. "You get a lot of these calls from this neighborhood?" A flicker of a wry smile crossed his face. Ms. Nguyen keeps us busy. Look, I can see there's nothing going on. I have to log it, but we're clear. Sorry to bother you. From her living room window, I could see the curtain twitch. HOA was watching. She wanted me to see her watching. The message was clear. I can summon men with guns to your door whenever I wish. A week later, it was city code enforcement. An older gentleman named Dave, his face a roadmap of bureaucratic fatigue, stood on my porch. Mr. Evans, we've received a formal complaint from your HOA president regarding an unpermitted structure. He gestured toward the dock. The complaint alleges recent, unpermitted construction with environmentally hazardous materials. The audacity of the lie was breathtaking. She was now fabricating environmental crimes. Please, come into my office, I said. I laid out the original city-stamped building permits from 2010, the architectural blueprints showing the dock as part of the initial construction, and the environmental compliance certificates for the pressure-treated cedar. Dave the inspector whistled under his breath. Well, I have never seen a homeowner this well documented. I believe in keeping good records, I said. This is textbook harassment, Mr. Evans, he said, shaking his head. My official report will state that the structure is in full compliance, and that this complaint is baseless. Between you and me, she has a reputation downtown. Files complaints like it's a competitive sport. After he left, the gravity of the situation settled on me. A false domestic disturbance call could end in tragedy. A fabricated complaint to Child Protective Services, which I now considered a very real possibility, could destroy our lives. The following day, the encrypted P.I. report from Marcus's contact arrived in my inbox. It was everything I had suspected and more. It detailed her disastrous fall from the town council, the bitter recall election, and the subsequent lawsuits she had filed against her political rivals, all of which had been dismissed as frivolous. It showed how she had systematically taken over the Serenity Woods HOA, turning it from a simple neighborhood committee into her personal fiefdom. The report confirmed my psychological profile. She was a narcissist, driven by a profound fear of irrelevance. That evening, I called Marcus. The report was illuminating, I said. It confirms she's unstable and obsessive. She's a piece of work, Marcus agreed. What's your next move? I'm done reacting, I said, my voice hard. She's trying to create a narrative that I'm a threat. She's using official channels to do it. The next time she does it, I'm going to be ready. What are you planning, Alex? There was a note of concern in his voice. A contingency, I replied. You used to call it a tripwire. I want to set a legal and procedural trap. If she escalates to a certain level, I want to have a coordinated response ready to go. A response that's by the book, legally unassailable, and overwhelming. I spent the next hour walking him through the plan, detailing the specific triggers, the necessary legal groundwork, and the precise level of response required. It was a plan born of my years in the intelligence world, adapted for this strange, suburban battlefield. It's a bold move, Alex, Marcus said when I had finished. It could go sideways. She's not going to stop, I said, my gaze falling on a drawing Lily had made, a crayon portrait of our family by the lake. She's backed me into a corner. I'm not going to let her threaten my family. I'm going to finish this. There was a pause. All right, Marcus said finally. I'll make the calls. I'll put the legal framework in place with the S. Attorney's office. The tripwire will be set. Just give the signal. I hung up the phone. I was no longer just a homeowner defending his property. I was an operator, setting a kill box. The thought was a chilling one. A betrayal of the peaceful man I had hoped to become. But Huang Guyan had left me no other choice. The final desperate move from HOA came on a crisp October evening. A chill in the air signaled the coming winter, and the trees ringing the lake were ablaze in hues of crimson and gold. It was the kind of idyllic scene we had moved here for, but a persistent undercurrent of dread had tainted everything. The strain was visible on Sarah's face, and Lily had started asking why the mean lady was always watching our house. The threat, when it was finally delivered, was not shouted. It was a quiet, venomous whisper, delivered with the chilling precision of an assassin's blade. I was in my garage, methodically organizing tools on a pegboard, a task whose simple order I found calming. The main door was open to the cool evening air. I sensed her presence before I saw it, a subtle shift in the atmospheric pressure, a familiar precursor to danger. I looked up. Hoa stood at the edge of my driveway, just outside the garage entrance. Her usual clipboard was absent. Her hands were empty, and her face was a pale mask of controlled rage. "We need to have a final conversation. Mr. Evans," she said, her voice unnaturally flat. This was different from her usual shrill indignation. This was cold. I placed a wrench on the workbench and moved toward her, stopping just inside the threshold of my garage. I instinctively kept the solid wood of the workbench between us, a small piece of cover. "I think everything has been said, Hua." "You think you're so clever," she said, taking a deliberate step onto my property. "With your organized files and your lawyer's letters, you think you can just defy me. In my own community." "I'm not defying you, Hua. I'm refusing to be illegally harassed. There is a legal and moral distinction." For a moment, a flicker of something surprise at my directness perhaps crossed her features before being consumed by a sneer. "Harassed I am upholding standards. You are the one who is the threat. You, with your sealed past and your secrets." My heart rate remained steady, an act of sheer will. "I don't know what you're talking about." A cruel, knowing smile touched her lips. "Oh, I think you do. It took some effort, some specialized research. You're not who you say you are. You didn't just work for the government. That's a conveniently vague term. There are years of your life that are a complete blank. No property records, no credit history. It's as if Alex Evans didn't exist before 10 years ago. People with gaps like that are usually hiding from something, or hiding what they were." My face was a mask of impassivity, a technique perfected in 100 interrogation rooms. Inside, my adrenal glands were firing. She hadn't found the truth, but she was circling it, sniffing at the edges of my carefully constructed cover. "You need to be very, very careful," she continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial hiss. "I have connections, friends in the media, a story about a mysterious man with a classified past moving into a quiet family neighborhood. A man who has the police called on him constantly. It's a very compelling narrative. It could attract a lot of unwanted attention. The kind of attention your current employers, that quiet security consulting firm, would likely want to avoid." The threat was now explicit. She was threatening to shatter my professional life, which was predicated on discretion. More than that, she was threatening to expose a history that, for the safety of myself and my former colleagues, was meant to remain buried. Imagine a hungry young reporter starts digging, she mused, savoring her perceived power. Asking questions indeed, see, talking to people you used to know. People in that world don't appreciate having their quiet retirements disturbed. Do they? It can ruin a man. She had found it. The lever she believed would finally break me my family's need for my anonymity. I stared at her, my mind a cold, calculating machine. The OODA loop. Observe. Orient. Decide. Act was cycling with blinding speed. Observe direct threat against operational security and family safety. Orient adversary is unstable and has demonstrated intent and capability for escalation. Decide. The pre-planned contingency is now authorized. Act. Let her spring the trap. Is that a threat? What? I asked, my voice dangerously calm. It's the terms of your surrender, she declared, her eyes glittering with the certainty of her victory. Tear down the dock, pay every cent of your fines, and post a full, public apology on the community Facebook page, admitting you were wrong. Do that, and your secrets can remain your secrets. Refuse, and I will burn your new life to the ground. She turned and walked away with the swagger of a victorious general. I remained in the garage, my fists clenched, the knuckles white. The peaceful man I had tried to be was gone, a casualty of this senseless war. She thought she was threatening a suburban dad. She had no idea she had just delivered an ultimatum to a man who had spent his career responding to ultimatums from men far more dangerous than she could ever imagine. I walked into my office, my movements economical and precise. I sat at my desk and sent a single, 3-word text to Marcus. Nightingale is compromised. My phone rang less than 10 seconds later. Report, Marcus said, his voice stripped of all warmth, all friendship. It was the voice of my commanding officer. Adversary made a direct threat against my cover and family, implied intent to expose my operational history. I reported, my words clipped and precise. Understood, Marcus replied. The tripwire is live. The U.S. attorney has been briefed. An emergency federal warrant has been drafted, pending probable cause. We'll be monitoring her communications. Let her make the final move. We'll be ready. Roger that, I said. Standing by. I hung up the phone. The trap was set. All I had to do now was wait for the Viper to strike. The final act of HOA's tragic farce began, as I knew it must, with an audacious display of fabricated authority. My silent refusal to capitulate to her ultimatum had clearly driven her over the edge. In her mind, my defiance was an intolerable narcissistic injury. The P.S. report, combined with her actions, had allowed Marcus and the U.S. Attorney's Office to paint a clear picture of a dangerously unstable individual engaged in a pattern of escalating harassment against a former federal agent. They had secured a sealed emergency warrant, contingent on a final, overt act. HOA was about to provide them with one. Marcus's call came at dusk 2 days later. We have it. Alex. She's moving. Monitored calls to a cousin of hers, a lowlife who runs a shady uniform supply business. They're talking about serving papers tonight. She hired 4 of his guys. They're armed. Local P.D. has been briefed. Sheriff Miller is on board. The joint response team is staged 2 blocks away. The trap is ready. Roger, I said, watching Lily play on the living room floor. We're ready. We ate dinner as a family. I projected an aura of calm I did not feel. My senses were screaming, every fiber of my being attuned to the sounds of the neighborhood. At 7:30 p.m., It began. Two black sedans, aging Crown Victorias, screeched to a halt in front of our house. They were equipped with cheap, magnetic bubble lights, a pathetic attempt to mimic unmarked police vehicles. Four burly men in ill-fitting security guard uniforms, trying to pass as tactical officers, piled out. To my trained eye, their movements were clumsy, their gear cheap airsoft knockoffs, but the sidearms holstered on their hips looked terrifyingly real. They stormed up my driveway. I opened the front door before they had a chance to kick it. "Can I help you?" I asked, my body positioned to block their entry. The leader, a man with a thick neck and angrier eyes, shoved a piece of paper into my chest. It was a poorly forged eviction notice, citing HOA bylaws as if they were criminal statutes. "Alex Evans, you're under arrest for criminal trespass and contempt of a community court order." The sheer absurdity of it was staggering. "This document has no legal authority," I said, my voice like ice. "And you are not law enforcement officers." Resisting, he bellowed, reaching for his hip. "Get him!" That was the trigger. I stepped back, slamming and deadbolting the heavy oak door. "Sarah, now!" I shouted. Sarah was already in the kitchen. Lily huddled behind her. Her hand was shaking, but her voice was resolute as she spoke into the phone. "This is Sarah Evans at 112 Willow Creek Lane. I am declaring an emergency. I have 4 armed men attempting to force entry into my home. They are impersonating law enforcement. My husband is a retired federal agent. I am requesting immediate police assistance. The FBI liaison for this matter is Section Chief Marcus Thorne." Outside, the men began hammering on the door, shouting, "Police, open up!" I moved to the window. The commotion had drawn out the neighbors. And there, standing on her perfectly manicured lawn, like a Roman empress at the Colosseum, was HOA. Her face was alight with manic triumph. This was her apotheosis, her moment of ultimate, public victory. She was having me physically dragged from my home in front of the entire neighborhood. She saw me in the window and gave a vicious, triumphant smile. But then, the familiar, piercing wail of sirens sliced through the night. Not 1 or 2, but a dozen, converging from all directions. The flashing red and blue lights of county sheriff's patrol cars flooded the street, their vehicles forming a tight perimeter, blocking both ends of the lane. The fake cops on my porch froze, their bluster instantly replaced by panic. A massive armored vehicle, a sheriff's department Lenco Bearcat, roared onto the scene, its sheer size and presence sucking all the air out of HOA's grand drama. The doors of the Bearcat and the patrol cars flew open, and a dozen heavily armed men from the county's SWAT team poured out. They moved with the disciplined, lethal grace of true professionals. A voice, amplified and utterly authoritative, boomed through a loudspeaker. "This is the sheriff's department to the individuals on the porch. Drop your weapons and get on your knees with your hands on your head. Do it now." The 4 men crumpled, dropping their weapons as if they were on fire. They were swarmed by SWAT operators, disarmed, and secured in seconds. The side door of the Bearcat opened, and 2 men stepped out. The first was a tall, imposing man in a sheriff's uniform, Sheriff Miller. The second, wearing a dark suit with an FBI vest over it, was Marcus. He walked to the center of the scene, now a secure crime scene, his gaze sweeping over the stunned neighbors before landing on HOA Nguyen. She stood frozen on her lawn, her face a ghastly collage of confusion and terror. The triumphant queen of moments ago was now a terrified, bewildered woman. I opened my front door and stepped out, with Sarah and Lily safely behind me. Marcus gave me a short, sharp nod. He and the sheriff then walked across the street, their boots crunching on the perfect lawn, and stopped before Hoa. "Ms. Huang Nguyen?" Sheriff Miller asked, his voice calm but heavy with authority. She could only manage a choked, gurgling sound. "My name is Sheriff Miller, and this is Section Chief Thorne of the FBI," he said. "For the past several months, you have been engaged in a criminal campaign of harassment against Mr. Evans and his family. Tonight, you escalated that campaign by hiring 4 armed men to impersonate law enforcement and attempt to kidnap a private citizen from his home. What you failed to appreciate, Ms. Nguyen, is that your neighbor is a former senior agent of the United States government. As such, threats against him and his family fall under federal jurisdiction." Marcus stepped forward. "We have recordings of your phone calls. We have financial records showing the payment to these men. We have a mountain of evidence documenting every crime you have committed. Based on that evidence, a federal judge issued a warrant for your arrest an hour ago." He looked from her to the dumbfounded neighbors. "This isn't about HOA rules. This is about a deranged obsession that led to multiple felonies. Let this be a lesson to all of you about the difference between community standards and criminal intimidation." Hua made a small, pathetic sound as a female deputy stepped forward and gently but firmly placed her hands behind her back. The click of the handcuffs was the only sound in the suddenly silent street. The queen had been deposed, her tiny, tyrannical kingdom dismantled, not with a bang, but with the quiet, inexorable weight of the law she so arrogantly thought she could manipulate. The resolution was not a spectacle, but a methodical legal process. Justice, grounded in the overwhelming evidence I had compiled and the FBI had corroborated, was unavoidable. Hoa Nguyen and her husband, Richard, implicated as the financial backer, faced a slew of state and federal charges. The federal charges: conspiracy to commit kidnapping, impersonating a federal officer as they had claimed federal authority in their fake warrant, and witness intimidation against a former federal agent were the most severe. Faced with irrefutable proof, their lawyers advised them to plead guilty. The fallout was total. Their legal defense consumed their entire life savings. The court ordered a massive restitution payment to my family, forcing the sale of their house. The iconic Lake Hoa sign was ceremoniously removed by the new, democratically elected HOA board within a week of their conviction. Hoa was sentenced to 7 years in federal prison, her deluded fantasies of power finally crashing against the hard reality of consequence. Richard, for his complicity, received 3 years of probation and a shattered life. The story reverberated through the community, a sobering fable about the poison of unchecked ego. In Serenity Woods, the fall of the Nguyen dynasty was like the breaking of a fever. The oppressive atmosphere of constant surveillance and petty tyranny lifted overnight. Neighbors began to re-emerge, blinking in the new light of a community free from fear. The HOA was restructured from the ground up. Its new charter focused on cooperation, not coercion. Mrs. Gable, a kind retired librarian, was elected president, and her first act was to host a bylaw bonfire, where the most absurd rules were symbolically put to the torch. For my family, peace returned. We were no longer the neighborhood pariahs, but the family that had weathered the storm. We received apologies, casseroles, and invitations to barbecues. The isolation ended, replaced by a genuine sense of belonging. Months later, on a warm spring afternoon, I was sitting on my dock. The dock. It was just a simple wooden structure, but it had become the unlikely battlefield for the soul of my new life. Lily was on the grass, teaching her doll how to do a somersault. Sarah sat beside me, her head resting on my shoulder, watching the gentle rhythm of the lake, which was now known, simply and appropriately, as Serenity Lake. The quiet I had so desperately sought was no longer a fragile, fleeting thing. It was deep and resilient, earned through a conflict I never wanted, but was uniquely prepared to fight. I had been forced to reconcile the two halves of myself, the quiet suburban dad and the trained operator, and in doing so, had discovered that the skills of my former life were not a curse to be buried, but a tool to protect the peace I had finally found. Looking at my wife and my daughter, safe and content in the afternoon sun, I felt a profound sense of stillness settle over me. I was home. The war was over,